Hi, everybody. I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Calvin coming to you from Houston, Texas with the latest on Hurricane Ian right before landfall in Florida on this Wednesday morning, September 28th, 2022. Bad news here in the latest update, 4 a.m. Central Time coming out. We now have a very strong Category 4 hurricane. That is a major hurricane. It's also a big jump from the latest advisory during the overnight hours. This went from being a 120 mile per hour storm now to a 140 mile per hour Category 4 hurricane. Looks really mean on satellite. Current position as of 4 a.m. about 60 miles just to the southwest of Fort Myers. The motion on this, though, is to the northeast. So we're not talking about a northeastward movement, which would take it into Fort Myers. We're talking right now about more of a movement that would take it just north of Fort Myers. So in between Fort Myers and Sarasota, around the Charlotte Harbor area. For those of you that live in Southwest Florida, or if you're familiar with Southwest Florida, back in 2004, we had a Category 4 hurricane make landfall in Charlotte Harbor. That was Hurricane Charlie. There's a big difference, though, between Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Charlie, namely the size of the storm. Charlie was a very compact, very small hurricane, and so the impacts were very small, or at least smaller and more concentrated to Charlotte Harbor. Hurricane Ian is enormous. It just went through an eye wall replacement cycle through the overnight that expanded the size of the hurricane, and it maintained its strength and then strengthened after the fact. So we're talking about a much more impactful storm than what we saw with Hurricane Charlie. Wherever you see the white and even the embedded areas of purple shading within this storm, that indicates the most intense part of the storm, the most intense thunderstorm development. And again, those purple tops here right along the north and northwest eye wall indicate the absolute worst part of this hurricane. And those are going to wrap around this storm as it gets closer to land. Here's the radar presentation right where I showed you those purple cloud tops. Again, the most intense rain bands here wrapping around the eye. We do have a gap here towards the south end of the eye wall. My suspicion is that these thunderstorms will continue to wrap around and will insulate this storm. But huge rain bands right now feeding into Southwest Florida from Chokoloskee up through Naples and Fort Myers, pretty much along US 41 and I-75 all the way up toward Charlotte Harbor. Big time rainmaker, although the worst of the rain does look to get up into the Tampa Bay area. Here's the latest forecast. Makes landfall again somewhere between Sarasota and Fort Myers, likely around Charlotte Harbor as a Category 4 hurricane sometime this afternoon or this evening. From there continues to the north, passing just to the east of Tampa. This puts Tampa on the better side of the storm. That being said, it looks like the east side of the storm in this instance, or rather the west side of the storm in this instance, is going to be the rainier side. So big time flooding potential from Tampa along I-4 out towards Orlando and the Space Coast. And then from there, the storm continues across the state into the Atlantic Ocean, where it reemerges and could maintain tropical storm strength as it makes an approach to potentially recurve and make a second landfall somewhere along the Georgia and South Carolina border. All right, let's talk about the models. Model comparison here in really good agreement. Again, here's Tampa, and then there's Fort Myers to the south. We're talking about a landfall somewhere potentially in Charlotte Harbor, cuts across the state, and again, reemerges potentially into the Georgia and South Carolina border. Here's a look at the high-resolution future track. There you go again. So Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda, Northport, Fort Ogden, Rotunda. These are the neighborhoods that are likely going to see the most direct impacts. However, on the south side, Fort Myers down through Cape Coral, Naples out towards Lehigh Acres, all the way along the stretch of road going out towards Lake Okeechobee, you're going to see some of the worst impacts in terms of rainfall and wind. But the storm surge potential is mainly focused from Port Charlotte and points south, because on the north end of the storm up towards Tampa Bay, the wind is going to be going offshore. So it's pushing the water away from the shoreline, whereas on the south side of the landfall, you get that onshore push of water. So the worst impacts from storm surge to the south of Port Charlotte. Huge rain potential, though, in this quarter from Tampa along I-4 towards Orlando, all the way up towards Jacksonville, St. Augustine, and then eventually the storm again recurving over the Atlantic and going back towards Georgia and South Carolina. By the time it's all said and done, again, in this corridor here from Tampa up to Orlando, and then again into the Jacksonville area, we could see locally 1 to 2 feet of rain with lower rainfall amounts to the south. However, the storm surge threat is going to be the highest to the south. So Port Charlotte, Fort Myers, Naples down to Marco Island, we could be seeing several feet of storm surge. The latest forecast, the National Hurricane Center putting up to 6 feet possible at the worst part of the storm, somewhere in this yellow shaded area, but it's really south of Sarasota, Bradenton, out towards Venice, Port Charlotte. As you get into Punta Gorda, Cape Coral, the Lee County Islands here, Sanibel, Captiva, down towards Bonita Springs, that we could see up to 12 feet of storm surge. A very impactful storm. We're going to be giving you updates as we go through the day. Very rare, though, to have a hurricane in this area in the last 170 years, though. In the Tampa Bay area alone, we have only had 5 major hurricanes pass within 50 miles of the city. This could be the 6th. Follow along on social media for the latest updates. Also follow this YouTube channel. We'll be doing updates as we get closer to Hurricane Ian's landfall in Florida later today.